We are live. Welcome. This is one of the last panels of this week. It's been a busy and exciting week. This is a panel on sustainable cannabis investment markets. And we're very lucky to be joined by a foursome, I guess, of really great speakers and investors and operators. So with that, I will get out of the way very quickly and introduce Coleman Beal, our moderator. Coleman, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and take it away.
Great, thank you, Ben. Glad to be here. So, my name is Coleman Beal. I am the CEO of Basscore. We are an industrial hemp processing company that was founded in 2014. And so, really, since inception of the company, sustainability has been a key component. In part, it's actually part of our mission statement, which is to process hemp for quality products, a better world, and a sustainable planet. And so from an operator standpoint, really a couple of things. One is that we believe that sustainability is the right thing to do. And two, we also believe that it's the future. And so we think that those companies that are not focused on and thinking forward about this topic are really going to struggle to attract capital and hence ultimately survive. So we have a great panel here of some of the earliest pioneers in cannabis investing. And so what I really hope to accomplish here with the audience is just to be able to walk away with a better understanding of how experienced investors think about sustainability as part of their investment making decisions. So with that, I'll let each panelist introduce themselves, and I'll start with Emily, and then Troy, and then David. So Emily.
Thank you so much, Coleman. Emily Paxia, co-founder, managing partner of Poseidon. We have been investing in the cannabis industry since January of 2014, and we have 2 funds dedicated to this industry, as well as multiple special purpose vehicles or syndicated vehicles for direct investing. And actually, one of our earlier investments was in Basscore. So I remember back in 2015 sitting across the table from Coleman and talking about what it would mean to participate in a truly sustainable business that could revolutionize the way that hemp is introduced into so many different end uses. And so it's been an interesting trajectory to invest across both all the way from adult use kind of lifestyle aspects of cannabis and software and all of the solutions around that, through to medical, to wellness, and then all the way on the other end, which is a very different space to play in with this industrial application of hemp and the cannabis plant. And I would say that, you know, as a cannabis investor, I feel like our lens is a little bit more progressive to begin with, and we're always looking at ways to think about this as a future-facing industry and what we can learn from other industries that didn't maybe do this quote-unquote right the first time, and how we can think about what is really intelligent about sustainable practices in our companies. And while I would say not all of our companies have a sustainable focus, I think that I could find ways to improve sustainability across all of them. And in the end, I think it would actually serve the efficiency of their operations. And I would say one time I thought about this very early on. I was touring one of the very large early facilities of cultivation. I won't say where or what, so I'm not tipping it off. But I remember asking the facility manager what their monthly electric bill was. And it was north of $50,000. And for me as an investor, I was like, whoa. And because I said, what's your plan to think about increasing the efficiency in this? And he said, well, we're selling the cannabis for so much, it's not something that's a concern for us at the time. And I thought, we're not looking into the future where the markets will open up and change. And so for me, that was where sustainability around cultivation came in. And it was a business decision as well as a kind of what I feel in my heart around the importance of sustainable practices. So that was just something that was kind of put me on the trajectory in terms of thinking about it from business as well as my passion.
Right, that's great.
Thanks. Thanks, Emily. And Coleman, it's great to be on a panel with both of you. So by way of introduction, you know, I'm the former CEO and co-founder of the ArcView Group, which I co-founded with Steve D'Angelo back in 2010, over 10 years ago. And we've built the first and largest group of investors focused on this space and entrepreneurs, and also put out the leading publisher of market research in the space as well. And we started a Canopy Boulder, which is the seed stage mentor-driven accelerator that's 5 years, 6 years running. Helped start CannaSure, which is the leading insurance provider in the space. And then I also serve on the board of the Marijuana Policy Project, as well as the National Cannabis Industry Association. And I got my start by working to make cannabis legal. And part of why it's so cool to be on this panel, so many years later with Coleman and Emily, is that Coleman and Emily were both ArcView members back at that time, as Coleman was looking at investments, but then also wound up getting into doing BastCore. And so it's great to see it all come full circle, and really, I think, represents what we've done in the space, which is to really be a meeting place for the key people that are getting into the sector on the investment and the entrepreneurial side. And as far as sustainability goes, I mean, the whole reason Steve and I started ArcView was based on the idea that a profitable, politically engaged, and responsible cannabis sector would really help us move to a legalized situation, right? Where it would help us earn our credibility politically. And so much part of that responsible piece has to do with sustainability. There's a lot to, there's environmental sustainability, but then there's also sustainability of like, well, are the people you're selling your product to subject to arrest and imprisonment? That might be something you might want to put some energy behind, right? And so it's really about trying to make sure that the cannabis sector gets seen alongside, organic foods and yoga and, this move towards sustainability, as opposed to just being lumped in the alcohol tobacco category. And I think a lot of these companies help make that possible. And so part of what we'll talk about as we go here, but is one of the things I also learned is that being in this space, the early people, and often many of the people that come in with such passion and such desire to do right by the world, either for political cause or for helping as many people or for environmental reasons. And they just really care about all this. And business is sort of the platform that they're using to bring forth a certain value into the world. And I think that as the market has grown and as there's been more and more opportunity, you see a lot of people coming into the mix who are there just for money. And so if you care about something, it's your job to figure out how to make the business case for that, but it's also got to be real. You can't just make that up. It's got to be a real business case. And we also have to be honest with ourselves when the right thing to do isn't actually the thing that's going to sell the investment professionals, and then have a talk with ourselves about what we're going to do then. And so anyway, we'll get into that more, but I'll just stop there and let David go.
Great.
Thank you for that, Troy and Emily and Coleman. And yeah, I mean, we've the three of us have been around for close to a decade now, and kudos to both of you and to all the investments you've made and all the support you've provided for the industry. Shout out also, of course, to Ben Gelt and Laura Day and the entire team at the Cannabis Certification Council for producing and curating really informative week of content around sustainability in the cannabis industry. As we all know right now, the council has been a true pioneer and leading advocate for clean, ethical, and sustainable business practices in the cannabis industry, and just want to thank them for that at the start of this. As we mentioned, my name is David Hess. I am the president and co-founder of Tress Capital. Tress Capital is a boutique, strategic private investment firm embedded at the core of the global cannabis sector, originating and managing investments for high net worth, family office, and institutional investors. We've been investing strictly in the cannabis space now for about a decade, as I mentioned, and we have a proven track record of successful industry investment, working closely with most of our portfolio companies, as well as companies outside of the portfolio, adding value add support. Our portfolio includes impactful industry leaders such as Headset, Go Headset, Tilt, SC Labs, Cannabis Now, Grownetics, Northbud Farms, Infusion Biosciences, Waste Tracker, and ICANN. We also provide M&A advisory, strategic business development, and other support to sector companies through Trust Solutions. As a two-time cancer survivor and longtime advocate of cannabis, our mission from day one back in 2013 has been to invest with purpose. We seek to drive, create, and facilitate impact within the cannabis industry and beyond, with a dual mandate, giving weight, right, to both economic and social returns. If we're going to advance the credibility of cannabis, which has been my mission for so many years now, we're going to need to win the hearts and minds of both legislators and Wall Street, right? And this is how we do it. This is how we do it. So I thank everybody for being here, and I really thank everyone for highlighting sustainability, fair trade, equity, and overall transparency on every level within our industry. That's how we're going to succeed.
Great. Thank you, David. And thank you, Emily and Troy, for those introductions. So just diving right in, I'll ask the panel. So as an investor, how much do you care about sustainability, and how much of an emphasis do you put on this topic when you're making your investment decisions?
I can start.
And anybody just jump in. Yeah.
So, I mean, the way that we've always approached investing is the first thing we do is we've divided the industry up into subsectors. And so that involves everything from technology all the way through to the operating companies. And as you know, also industrial hemp has its own unique carve out for us. And so the first thing we're doing is we're looking for teams and for the companies that fill those subsectors that we're looking to get into the fund to kind of balance our portfolio. I would say that it's not if I'm honest, sustainability is not the first and leading thing that we're looking at, with the exception of certain types of companies. So with certain types of companies, like for example, we are investors in Agrify, which is a indoor cultivation solution technology. And one of the reasons that I'm really interested in that, and we had entered into it actually through a company called TriGrow. But what it does is it improves the efficiency of indoor cultivation. And for us, that was something that was really important to see. As I mentioned in my intro, first of all, it's interesting from going forward as the prices of cannabis do fall in markets as they mature. You want to make sure that your input costs are improved on that. So it's a good business perspective on that, but then it's also improving the use of energy, the efficiency around cultivating these plants. And so therefore it's less of a drain on the energy grid, and it's just using less resources. It's more water efficient. There's so many different ways that it really does kind of amplify that indoor grow experience. Now, someone may see, why do you invest in indoor cultivation to begin with? That's not as efficient as greenhouse or outdoor cultivation. For us, it's something that if we want to participate in certain markets have it written into the regulations, it requires indoor cultivation. So or also the fact that like you're not really cultivating cannabis in Western Massachusetts in February. It's just not going to happen, and you can't supply that chain. And until we open up, interstate commerce, it's going to kind of be this way. And so within the framework that kind of keeps you in that box, you have to think about how we can improve it in the interim. On the flip side of that, we invested into a cultivation project, a vertically integrated operator called Spark in California. They're very long running. They've been around since like 2010, very compassionate lens. And one of the things that we loved about it is the founder, Eric Pearson, identified and worked with the guys that are part of the Demeter certification, which is biodynamic cultivation. And he actually created a biodynamic Demeter certified farm in Sonoma. And those practices are also very mindful of the environment. And it's just one of those things that for us, again, it was good business practices, because you're cultivating outdoors, which requires less resources, less energy. You're using certain practices that will, of course, prevent you from participating in any kind of chemicals or pesticides that could harm the earth. And then, so that's beneficial to the earth. But then on the flip side of that, then we know the product is going to pass lab testing, which is important in California, and it's safer for the end consumer. And so therefore you're ensuring that your supply chain is clean and thoughtful about how it will move through that process. The same thing I'll say with investing into industrial hemp. The last thing I wanted to do, and learning from what happened with bamboo, frankly, and the greenwashing that went on with that, is when we were investing into industrial hemp for end uses, especially like for fabrics and textiles, we wanted to make sure that it was truly sustainable technology and that it wouldn't have this other backlash into the environment. And for us, it was, again, it was a business decision as well as a kind of like what resonates internally for me, because it's about the future. It's about, to your point, serving those end companies when that supply chain matters and the traceability of how it's done matters. So those are just a few different aspects of the industry where it has mattered to us. But I will say we are starting with the ecosystem of investable opportunities in the industry and then thinking about sustainability as a piece of that as business and kind of ethics.
Sure. Yeah. David, same question. I mean, how do you, how much of an emphasis do you put on this topic?
Pretty significant. You know, again, having a positive impact, on the industry, and then certainly if you've got a greater impact outside the cannabis industry, even better. But that's been a critical part of our thesis, really from day one. We felt that, you know, especially investing so early on in the industry, having, you know, like most of us on the panel, having investment horizons of sometimes 7-year plus, right? Our investors want to realize the ROI, not just the economic ROI, but the social and impactful ROI. And they can a lot earlier than that, you know, outsized economic horizon, right? At the end of that term. And so for us, it's been extremely critical. It's not just for ourselves and ensuring that there's a culture fit between our firm and the operators, you know, but, you know, frankly, having a positive mission, it's not a violation of the rules of capitalism, right? Let's get that straight. In fact, it's quite the opposite, right? Purpose-driven companies witness higher market share gains. They grow 3 times faster on average than their competitors, right? All while achieving higher workforce and customer satisfaction. So it's, you know, it's much like a foundation to a house, right? It's the clear purpose that the organization has for existing. It's their soul, it's their identity, right? So certainly it's part of our diligence process. It's actually early on in our diligence process. If I'm looking at a deal and I can't find the impact, or it's not glaring, you know, the impact they're making, we'll skip it for ourselves. That doesn't mean we won't pass it along to someone else that maybe isn't as focused. That's not part of their thesis, because again, we're here to support the industry as a whole. But for trust, you know, that is extremely critical to have that impactful element, whether it's sustainability, as Emily mentioned, in a subsector like cultivation. We've made an investment into a company called Grownetics. Grownetics is working with the council and plenty of others in sustainability, Resource Innovation Institute, and others, really working on validating what a lot of these cultivators are claiming, which is going to be very, very helpful for these operators claiming sustainability. Because as we said, right, Troy was saying earlier, it's more important, you know, to walk the walk than just talk the talk, right? And sustainability is a buzzword these days, right? But without measuring and validating that sustainability, then it's really hard to understand if it's just a buzzword or if it's real. And so through companies like Grownetics and Agrify, right, as part of, you know, took over Trigrow, really helping cultivators understand efficiency. But, you know, we're far along in the game at this point where I think a lot of them do understand the efficiency. It's more about validating that efficiency and ensuring that that they're on the right path as far as that goes. So to answer your question, Coleman, it is extremely important for us. In fact, our next fund that will be coming out early next year will likely focus on incentivizing operators as far as sustainability and impact goes. And that might come in the form of allocation and tranches, right? Tranching out allocations. And once we see that measured impact, we can release the next tranche. And that's just one of many incentives. And I'm sure we'll get into that today on the panel as well. How do we incentivize operators to have best practices. But so yeah, 100%. It's extremely important for us.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned validation. We'll come back to that here in a little bit. But Troy, I'm curious from your perspective at your days at ArcView, you had so many different people from so many different walks of life. A lot of times I like to use the phrase that, the platform that you had was it pulled a lot of the early investors out of the woods, so to speak. And so from that perspective, how many of the people and people that came to the ArcView events and you interacted with talked about sustainability? And the same question, how much of an emphasis do you think investors are placing on sustainability when they're making their investment decisions?
Yeah, I mean, certainly earlier on, there were more people that had sustainability as a real passion. But I saw a big kind of a dip during the rush, right? But now it's like it's coming back around because I think smart investors are playing to where the puck is going to be. And as we face this climate crisis and as we face, difficult, as things get more and more competitive, there's the approach of slash and burn and like cut it down. Let's make everything just anything we can. There's another group of thought that says, hey, look, actually, this is going to become more and more and more important. So if we build this into the DNA of the company, then more people are going to want to work for this company. We're going to get better talent. It's easier to raise money when your company is sustainable, because there's all these different places and companies and investors that want to look at your deal because it solves some big problem. And so I just think that the future is going to have that. And so more and more investors start to care about that. And, we now have the ArcView Collective Fund, which is a group of people who each, invest, and then they all share in the decision-making around how those investments happen, and they're like deal leads that go and work and look at the due diligence on it. And certainly in that group, you're going to find more people that care about that. And there's also a powerful kind of socialization effect. And that's part of what we tried to do, early on when we were just bringing people together. And now when we're also actually pulling them together to actually invest directly together and be economically tied together, right? Is the effect of the socialization, right? Because somebody might show up and think, well, I just want to invest in what's going to make money, or someone shows up and says, I think I want to invest because, my mother had cancer and this was powerful for her, so I want to be involved in a business that matters, right? But then you start discovering all the other ways it matters, and you start realizing that, it's not just about money. There's other ways to make an impact here. And everybody, no matter how much they tell you that they want to just make money, in their heart of hearts, underneath it all, they care about meaning and they care about impact. It might just not be popular to say that in certain circles. And so I see our role as kind of creating an environment where people can discover what the kinds of meaning motivators that underlie their investing or their potential for investing.
Right. Yeah, and that segues perfectly into my next question in terms of how do we define sustainability? And in that vein, how do we measure sustainability and try to quantify that? So, David, you mentioned the validation process. So I'll let you kick off this topic.
Yeah. So another great example is a company that we actually incubated. We saw that there was a real need for understanding the waste that was being produced by our industry. And waste, when I say waste, I'm talking about everything from energy, right, down to packaging, right, and everything in between. And so we wanted to first measure that, right? It's not enough for us to just look at the vape cartridges out there, the doob tubes, the plastic doob tubes, the tremendous amount of packaging that is entailed in order to qualify as child resistant. Doesn't always have to be plastic, but that's another topic. But point is we wanted to understand A, how much waste there is. B, could we reduce that waste, especially once we've started to measure it and highlight how much is being produced. Our theory is that once we call that out, we'll start to reduce that waste, and then ultimately begin to recycle and upcycle that waste and turn that into something positive for the world. And so whether it's measuring it, measuring the actual, efficiency of a cultivation through grownetics, or how much waste our industry is producing, and how much waste we are, reducing and saving, right, is something that Waste Tracker and grownetics are both doing. And it's again, it comes down to incentive, and we're still working with operators, specifically in California right now. They're bogged down. I get it. There are a lot of challenges facing operators today, but we hope that this is ultimately a form of support that we're offering operators. It's a free service at Waste Tracker. It's a software. It's got KPIs with metric, and so you're set as far as that goes. But we're really asking operators to really make sustainability key, right? Consumers, 8 out of 10 consumers, Coleman, have actually said that they're willing to pay as much as 25% more for a product, right? That's fascinating. They're willing to pay more if they know that money is going to a sustainable product or a sustainable operation, right? And that goes to the equity of the workers and everything that entails at an operation. Mm-hmm. And so we're measuring not just the product and the service, but we're measuring the operation as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that, sustainability, I see it very broadly. I think, obviously environmental sustainability is the way most people think about it. And my definition certainly includes that, but it also is about, paying fair wages. It's about the sustainability of your people. It's about the sustainability of your consumers. I mean, we're in a very rare consumer world where, we live in a world where at least 90% of all cannabis consumers in this world are still subject to arrest and imprisonment, right? So we're creating products that for a lot of people would land them in jail, or would at the very least mean they have to break the law in order to consume the product, right? So that strikes me as important to sustainability, as well as everything from management practices too, right? Like, how are you creating a business that can thrive in a new world, right? And with the new ways people are looking to get meaning from their work, right? I mean, there's just so much to, in my mind, to sustainability, and so that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, Emily, do you have thoughts on how to define sustainability and measure as well?
I mean, for me, it's all about, as long as I wouldn't say I have a metric around it, since that's not our core focus of our strategy. But I would say that for me, it's about improving the efficiency. If it's cultivation, it's about improving the efficiency of the cultivation, the use of the resources that go into it. Just like I kind of talked about with Agrify, with like, for example, industrial hemp, it was to make sure that it didn't create some other bad byproduct or negative consequence. And what I mean by that is so much more than just the environment. I mean, negative social consequence as well, in terms of how these things are being set up. And so it's really about taking a look at what has been standard and making sure you can improve upon that. And sometimes it's an incremental improvement, and sometimes it's an exponential improvement through true innovation. And that's really what is exciting. But I I would not say we have any metrics about it. We're always just trying to push the ball further down that field. And I'm very impressed by what Troy and David were talking about, and that meant in kind of creating those lines. And I think I know other folks that have been a part of this symposium have also been talking about having those metrics. Like I know Derek talks about it in terms of kind of best practices around cultivation and checking the box on that. And it's so very important to have that. But I would say that we've looked at what other groups have done, and for example, relied on the fact that Demeter has this biodynamic certification process, and that was going to set a certain standard of cultivation around that biodynamic farm. And the reason I knew more about that too is that I have a colleague who works in the biodynamic wine industry, so I had been familiar with it for a long time before cannabis. So knowing that they had gone through that process was a good check the box for us as well.
Sure. Emily, I'll start with you on this question. What opportunities do you think that cannabis presents for investors who are interested in deploying capital specifically focused on sustainability?
So the way I always think about where you get the real upside in investing is if you identify a gap so when I always look for what's not working. In fact, that's how we started our entire strategy of investing into the industry, is walking into a beautiful dispensary and seeing them using paper and pencil ledger, and knowing just exactly what they were up against from a regulatory standpoint to track everything through a system. So I mean, for us, it's always about looking for that gap. And I think that that's what's come up time and time again. And I think that I completely agree with what Troy was saying, is like, yes, we all care about money. It's like, that's the table stakes. Done. We all agree to that. But we also, not only do the investors really care about their dollars having an impact, I think that the consumers really care about that. And I think that looking into the future of people, okay, so the first hurdle is to get cannabis legal so people can access it. It's to get industrial hemp into a supply chain so people can wear it, live in it, use it for packaging, all of those wonderful things, batteries. It's like, so let's get these things into the market. And then we have to also engage the consumer on kind of a simultaneous track about why it matters to have these products be sourced sustainably, cultivated sustainably, run through a supply chain more sustainably, because that's really the future. I mean, what we're seeing in California with these wildfires is the result of the environment kind of raising a flag to us. And we can't ignore that the environment has gone, and even just everything with the derecho that went through the Midwest, the number of hurricanes, we're already into like the D's on the Greek alphabet on that. So it's like the environment is telling us something very clearly here. And I think that we have to think about that, and we have to think about what it will mean to the consumer. And I think about what happened with organics, right? If you ever watched the movie Food Inc., what was really compelling to me is that Walmart started selling organic yogurt. And I wouldn't say that Walmart has been known, traditionally speaking, as being like, we're focused on sustainable and healthy products. But what happened is the consumer spoke, and it was something that they requested. And so therefore that drives the dollars and it drives the support to do it. So I think that that's really important to think about, is that end engagement for our whole industry. And to Troy's point, I think it also helps us with regulators to paint the picture that we're trying to build something that's net positive to society, as opposed to creating more constraints. So that's some of the things we're thinking about. Does that make sense?
Total sense. I totally agree. I think that there is we're certainly seeing a pull from the consumers demanding more sustainable practices. But David, when you look at the playing field for opportunities and sustainable investing in cannabis, I mean, how are you thinking about that?
So twofold. Number one is, it is critical for anybody, on the investment side, thinking about making an allocation into a cannabis company focused on sustainability, align themselves with someone like a Tress, a Poseidon, an ArcView, somebody that, an investment firm that understands the space, that cares about sustainability, that highlights transparency, and that we're on the same page, right? That's number one. Number two, as I mentioned before, with Tress specifically, we're focused on sustainable operators within our portfolio, as well as supporting those outside of our portfolio. And so within our portfolio, certainly Waste Tracker, Gronetics, both be coming up with raises in the near future, and are two great ones to watch for if you're out for sustainability. And again, you mentioned Derek and the Resource Innovation Institute. Gronetics has been working really closely with them for some time, and we'll continue to work closely with them on measuring and validating sustainability at the cultivation level. And you know, again, Waste Tracker, right? Super early opportunity, and really one of the only platforms working on identifying and measuring waste that is being produced in our industry. So those are both great opportunities, and you know, Coleman Bascor obviously is a great one as well. You know, anyone that is thinking about industrial hemp, I think is on the right path. And, you know, I know CBD has been, you know, and certainly THC, right, has been the sexier of the opportunities over the past years. You know, but again, as retail investors have seen time and time again, if they're not going to align themselves with an expert in this space, they will likely get burnt, right? Excuse the pun, right? But they will likely get burnt. And, you know, now more than ever, right? When they can't physically go to a lot of these networking events, now's the time to reach back and circle back to some of those connections you might have made at a previous event, like Emily or Troy or myself, and reconnect with one of us and really make sure that you're looking at sustainability as you know, part of your diligence package as well.
Sure, no, that's great insight. And so Troy, on that note, where do you see the puck going in terms of cannabis and sustainable investing?
Yeah, I think that I would say hemp is big, like hemp for industrial reasons. Everything, and I just feel like we're on the cusp of a lot of advancements, and also a lot of rise in cost, and the desire for consumers for different base products in a wide range of things, everything from building to fuel to everything. I mean, I always make the, you know, slash joke or point that when I got involved in this in 1995, I was pretty down on what I would call the hempsters, you know, the people who, when we were trying to legalize medical marijuana, were running around saying, no, hemp can save the world. And I was just like, okay, all right, well, let's just pass this law. We'll talk about that later, you know, because it was just so outrageous. Some of the things that they, you know, like, oh, I'm like, it's going to solve everything. And, you know, slowly but surely over the last couple years, especially because I think a lot of the technology is starting to catch up, and the entrepreneurial passion and energy is starting to get devoted to those things that theoretically were possible 20 years ago. And so I'm starting to kind of eat my words a little bit, because actually I think the hempsters were right. Ultimately, it just needed the attention of the entrepreneurial spirit and capital to really help it become. And so I think slowly but surely, yeah, I think hemp is going to change the world, and it already is. And so I think I would look at innovations in processing and in ways to reduce the price such that it becomes more competitive with what's being used currently. I also think that anything related to the waste of the cannabis sector is interesting. If you spend some time at a grow, I mean, you just like, you're throwing that out. You're throwing that out. All that goes out. And then you have all these rules with, you know, all these special rules for how to handle cannabis waste, because, you know, they treat THC like it's plutonium being put in the ground, you know, and it's like, there is some really innovative solutions here. And I foresee a future where we're not wasting any part of the plant or any part of the soil. And then also packaging, right? I mean, every one of these, I mean, you see some of these packaging rules, they're crazy. And so I think there's some innovations that need to happen at the regulatory level just to reduce the amount of packaging, but then also when it comes to creating sustainable packaging, nobody should be using plastic anymore. I mean, we just have better things. And so I think those are three areas where I see a big opportunity.
Great. Well, since we've mentioned industrial hemp twice now, maybe we talk about that for a second. I mean, obviously from Basscor's perspective, industrial hemp is the heart of what we do and the processing. And it's certainly been an interesting evolution to watch since we started the company in 2014. So I agree with you, Troy. I'm very bullish on this, where industrial hemp is going, but it's certainly been a journey full of peaks and valleys. So, I'm curious on how each of you have, how are you thinking about industrial hemp, call it in 2013, 2014, and what's been your mindset over the years as industrial hemp has gone from then to where we are today? And Emily, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we noticed right away was that, and exactly what Troy was just saying, is that in the processing aspect of this, we've suffered from not having innovation around it. And it's about innovation in terms of pulling old technologies back into the supply chain. And it's also about innovating how we process this plant so that we're doing so in a way that you can have all of these end results. And it is going to be about getting the cost of these inputs down so that people can take it seriously and put it into their businesses. And I completely agree with Troy. I mean, it's a regulatory requirement to have these packaging aspects, and they're so costly to the environment and to the, actually, frankly, to the operating companies, because it's just like packaging on top of packaging on top of packaging. And all of that is right now petroleum-based plastics, except there are some companies that are working with industrial hemp for plastic around that, or plant-based plastics as well, which is really interesting and is going to be needed because that's just a real issue. But so for us, we're continuing to explore the technology along the supply chain, because there are so many areas that I know we can, for me, it's all about replacing petroleum with plant-based resources and hemp specifically, because hemp has such an amazing set of characteristics to it that really lend itself to it, but also broader bast fibers would fall into that. But, I mean, I've been following the work that, what's his name, Mitlin, and they've been doing on carbon nanotechnologies and batteries. And I just think about, when you broaden the aperture around where cannabis sits, it's no longer has to be a siloed industry. It can all be a part of so many other aspects of what we're doing in our lives. And I think about industrial hemp very much in this way. Planned obsolescence around technology is a business model. We all have a new iPhone or whatever every few years, and the same. And so what is in that is, these minerals that are hard to mine, these batteries that come from graphite, which is hard to mine and has a decreasing battery life. And what we could be seeing is innovation around those inputs into technology. And so I start to think about how this goes into these other industries very quickly if we can prove it out. And so for me, it's all about investing along that processing supply chain such that it becomes viable as a scaled input into these other technologies. And so for me, that's really important, because it does drive me crazy to see my technology as a potential impact on the environment and on society. And then, I think with COVID, we saw that the world has kind of changed, right? Like everything used to come from China, or it still does, but I mean, a lot of things came from China, and our industry actually faced a lot of pain points back when this was ramping in China and we couldn't get packaging, we couldn't get product in. And so we started to see our companies think about where they could diversify their supply chain for all of the facets of their business. And now we're seeing more interest in Mexico, more interest in India, and just making sure that you're not in trouble if that should happen. But I'm also really interested in seeing things brought back to the US. And that's one of the things that's exciting about the hemp supply chain, is we can regionalize the processing of this. And therefore, you're also improving the sustainability of the products you're putting out, because they haven't traveled around the world to get into a cannabis facility in Western Massachusetts. So those are I'm really focused on that. Supply chain is the short answer of that, but that's why. That's the bigger context of why for me with industrial hemp. And of course, I mean, I've totally not talked about building materials, but maybe one of the other panelists would want to jump in on that. But I do think that that's going to be incredibly important. And if anyone's ever watched the documentary Bringing It Home about what it's like to live in a hemp home, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary experience.
For sure, for sure. So David, how are you thinking about industrial hemp and 6 years ago versus today?
Again, early on in the industry, when I would say to 2010, 2011, 2012, for us, it was really important to support the legs of the industry, and that's why you see companies in our portfolio, like a headset, for example, right? That when it comes to data, right? Nobody makes decisions without data, right? If J&J is about to, Coca-Cola, anybody, right, is about to come out with a new product, it's not because someone on the C-level has a hunch that something's going to work, right? They go after data, and so it was really about the legs of the industry. That said, right, and right, we also had to make money for ourselves and for, as Emily said, make money for ourselves and for our investors early on, so that that would continue to open doors, to open wallets, right, and generate that financial support that we needed early on. Now that we've done that successfully, I think the three of us on this panel have, for ourselves and for our investors, I think the time is right to really look at industrial hemp. We know that it's going to grow from, I think it's just about a $5 billion market to, I think, a $26 billion market over the next 4 or 5 years. That's very significant. What we started to talk about, textiles, right? But there's everything from paper goods, automotive products, bioplastics, composites. I mean, I don't know why we're still making products out of cotton, right? It just doesn't make sense. And so, there's a process called phytoremediation that hemp was used, in places like Chernobyl to remediate the land, right? And so I think now that the as of 2018, right, and we're now allowed to look at hemp in a more serious way, now that the Farm Bill has passed. I think that gives us better opportunity and at a reduced risk. And so, from that standpoint, we are certainly looking to make more allocations towards companies that are focused on hemp and industrial hemp in particular.
Got it. And Troy, same to you. I mean, in terms of how you've seen your mindset from industrial hemp in the early days to where we are today, which in my opinion, we're still in the very early days as it relates to industrial hemp, but I'm curious to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing really more than what I shared earlier, which is that I used to kind of poo-poo it because I thought everybody, because I couldn't see evidence of its prowess in the market anywhere. And now starting to really see a real potential with it. And so I think with investing, it's all about timing. And, I've kind of historically been way too early on a lot of things. ArcView, we started in 2010. I mean, nobody was investing really in 2010. And, it took a while before anybody started doing anything, right? And, I was part of a digital video media.com startup in which like a cross between YouTube and Facebook in like 1999, right? So it's like, it was like 10 years, it was the right idea. It was 10 years too early, right? And I think that there are quite a few entrepreneurs in the hemp space that have fallen into that trap and been stuck kind of treading water for so long because like they're just ahead of their time. But I think we are now rounding that corner, and it's so hard to talk in generalities because every specific technology and every specific application is going to be somewhere on that curve. And part of the job of an investor or an entrepreneur is to figure out where we are. I mean, if you have too much vision as an investor, you wind up investing too early in things and not realizing that, well, is the next round of funding going to be there? Are these guys going to prove enough in this time frame in order to generate the next round of funding to take them the next place? And if you're too optimistic and you're too, dreamy about what's possible, and you drink too much of the entrepreneur's Kool-Aid, you wind up investing too early, and there not being another round of funding available. So that's why. But then if you can find something where there's been some real innovation, and you can see that the market is really developing around it, that's a good time to get in. And so I think we're there on a lot of things right now.
Yeah.
Just to jump in on that, one of the things that since we started to engage to prepare for this platform, I've been thinking a lot about how do we engage. There are funds and firms that sustainability is like at the heart of their strategy. And so if cannabis is an opportunity to invest in sustainable practices, I'm trying to think about how we reach out to those groups, because now we can't do the in-person thing. So it's something that's on the top of my mind. And it was fortuitous because just this week, PitchBook, I get their daily newsletter, and they did a report on sustainable investing and the trends in it. And so I was like, oh, it's incredibly timely for what we're talking about this week. But I was just thinking about maybe just like the old days when we first launched our fund, I used to just cold reach out to founders being like, hey, do you need money? But when I thought it was an interesting company because nobody had known about us. And so I was thinking about maybe just establishing connections with some of these sustainable investors as a way to draw some fresh capital into the industry and really kind of create that discussion that, yeah, there are opportunities to invest in disruptive technologies. Because one of the things I've always liked about investing in cannabis is that cannabis is a good proving ground for technology that can then be applied into other sectors. And so like indoor cultivation maybe becomes more important as the environment continues to be taxed if it can be done efficiently in city centers to feed those populations. Not that a lot of people want to live in a city anymore. These are just things that I think about how we can apply these things more broadly speaking, but cannabis is the proving ground and the testing place for it.
Just to add to what Emily is saying, and maybe as a little bit of an answer, what I've been doing and what we've been doing at Tress has been, I guess since like June, really doing exactly that, engaging with impact investors. There's $1 trillion, I didn't know this, right? There's over $1 trillion out there in impact funds that are, bring it all in, right? That are specifically investing in sustainability and impact. And a lot of them just really never put 2 and 2 together and looked at cannabis, like Troy was saying, as a vice, industry, and not as impact and sustainability. And so one thing I did, I took action, it's easy for everyone to do. Just a little thing I did, I joined an impact group. Top Tier Impact is the name of it. Simple, and really what that has done is it's opened the doors real wide to a vast industry of impact investors and operators, working and operating in sustainability and impact. And it's like I said before, right? It's winning the hearts and minds of those outside of our industry, and to remind them what this industry is all about. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I think that all of us can be doing, reaching out, as Emily said, to impact investors out there, alternative investors, and sustainability investment funds. There are plenty of them. They're looking for great investments. I don't see better investment for them outside of our industry, and we've proven that at this point, especially here in the US, right? It was all about Canada early on, but now it's about the US, certainly. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about opening doors for new investors and for them sharing the story you know, a positive story with their stakeholders, right? And slowly, this will become an industry and like any other, and no one will blink twice when you tell them that, you know, what you do for a living.
For sure.
I I think I just loved what you were saying, Emily. I was just thinking about this cold calling and offering people money, and I'm picturing you like you're like Ed McMahon, like calling people, be like, I've got money for you, like just some random call. I love it. I love it. That's such a great early fund story.
It happened.
With phone calls, I would say. You all, this is Ben again coming in because my producers are telling me to. What a great conversation. Coleman, thank you so much for moderating. Emily and David and Troy, really, you know, I mean, all you have to do is look at your various websites and LinkedIn's and backgrounds. I mean, and you guys said it today, you've all been looking at and investing in and working with some of the best known firms in this industry. And I think that reflects a great deal of thought, frankly, and hard work on all of your part. So, you know, how fortunate for us, both here in the live audience and for our network, because this is all being recorded and we're going to be making it available to be able to share in your knowledge. And, you know, I said it in the comments as you guys were talking, you know, and I'll just shamelessly plug, we are happy, the council is happy to continue to provide a platform for folks that are in this industry that are trying to drive sustainable behavior. And I would love to maybe get the 3 or 4 of you back on a call in the next couple of weeks to talk about what kind of content we can do over the next year to do that, to solicit those sustainable entrepreneurs to come and connect with you and see if we can't create some pipeline and some deal flow. So yeah, everybody smiles at that word. You guys, thank you so much. That was really just brilliant and insightful. We have 2 more panels left today for the entire week. So if you're in the audience, you've got choice between marketing sustainable cannabis and seeding sustainability. I think, you know, 2 good tracks there. Thank you, Troy. See you, man. Marketing sustainable cannabis is going to be led by Lisa Buffo from the Cannabis Marketing Association. So it's going to be really great content, some strong panelists there. And seeding sustainability, if you're a cultivator, that's the one to go to, being led by Nat Pennington from Humboldt Seed Company. The man is a wealth of information. And I know that Sarah and Betsy are also incredible. So thank you again to Coleman, to Emily, to David, to Troy, who signed off. Thank you to our producers. Thank you to the audience. And hopefully we'll see at least a couple of you guys in about an hour for the closing ceremony. Should be fun. And thank you so much. Talk to everybody soon.